Beautiful. We are back for another episode of Wise Words Book Summaries.
You say habits.
Yeah, well, pretty much. I was about to say, yeah, but this is pretty much the last one. We're doing Hooked next week, and then we're going on to fitness and health, so a bit of a change. But
I'm sure people are probably fed up with habits by now, just like we are.
If someone has watched all, I don't know how many we've done now. Is it like 8?
It must be something like that. Yeah.
You get a VIP, you get a VIP pass to all of Wise Words.
Honestly, it's been a slog. I mean, to be fair, most of these books, I mean, as I'm sure you'll find out from listening to this one, cover the same main points again and again, but they all have their sort of like different sort of edge to how you do these things. To be fair, we were talking as well about potentially doing a habit summary podcast afterwards, but I don't know if I can put myself through that right now. Maybe we'll have to wait a couple of months and then sit back and be like, right, now let's do it, because
let's take it.
Exactly that.
For a while. Yeah. Nah, absolutely. Well, today we are doing Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. This is quite a popular one, I think, amongst habit books. I've heard a lot of people talk about it before, and I've known about it for a while, but I never actually got around to reading it. But yeah, I thought this was a pretty good book. Overall, it was a different kind of approach.
He's a Stanford professor as well, isn't he? He's
I don't know what it is. He has a department, but I don't think I don't know if he's a professor there or he's a visiting.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Founded the Behaviour lab. Good point. He's got like a lab at Stanford, doing behavior design. And funny enough, you'll probably hear a lot more about his equation he came up with, which we'll talk about in this podcast, but also when we do Hooked, because a lot of Hooked is based off his teachings here. And he inspired, if I remember correctly, from Hooked, he inspired a bunch of these sort of like Silicon Valley tech startups in, changing behavior design and how to get people, I'm going to say addicted is pretty strong, but get people addicted to their applications.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's quite interesting because his approach is it's easy to implement. And I think that's why it's been adopted so much, because it can just be extrapolated onto something, especially in terms of like tech companies and tech startups and whatever kind of software, especially to do with like social media and things like that, which are just trying to make it a habit of you using it. And gaining your attention. So it's I thought it was a good book.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's just we're going to jump straight into the notes or the book summary.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go straight from the mindset shift, which is something we talked a lot about with these habit books in terms of identity, identity shifts. But did we talk about? I guess you could kind of say mindset and identity are kind of similar. Like
I would say that
same, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
But here, what I thought was quite interesting is he takes a more sort of like forgiving approach, let's just say, to the habits. Because I don't really don't really remember very well the other books saying, if you miss a habit, don't worry about it too much. Whereas he takes a more, a kinder approach to yourself. So sort of, don't judge yourself if you miss your habits. Embrace mistakes as discoveries.
Yeah, because you don't want to add more friction than is needed, right? Like it's already going to be difficult to change your behavior because you're essentially changing your identity, or you're doing something against your identity. So you want to reduce that friction. And so one of those aspects is essentially being nice to yourself about it.
Yeah,
and yourself up about it.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And I quite like his sort of like reframing. He does quite a good job of this sort of like reframing in general. And it's this, idea that every mistake is just a new discovery. And he's got this nice analogy here that I took a note of. So like, think about your habits as if they were recipes. So that if the result isn't to your liking, you need to change the ratios and fiddle with the ingredients, and also just not beat yourself up about it. Which is it's a good point, because I don't really think the other books, maybe they did give you that leeway, but I just don't remember them being very explicit with it, sort of saying, if you do fall off the habit train, like I think James Clear's like, don't miss it twice, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But it's also like, it's probably a good time to like take stock of why you failed. And it's funny we say this because we were just talking before this podcast about daily reviews, because me and you both do one. And it's funny because I have exactly that question, which is like, what habit did I miss today? So every day I'm always thinking, what did I miss? And then I usually have a why. And it's funny, we were just saying as well, because obviously it's really easy to figure out why. It's then trying to make the change to not miss it again in the future.
No,
and I think, do you know what, funny enough, now that we're talking about this is probably the step I don't take. So the step I take at the moment is obviously identifying what it is, why it is, but then I never really put into plan, like an action plan of like how I'm going to make that not happen again. And we were potentially talking about this idea of, then assigning yourself a task for the next day. So we use Notion, but you could, use a pad of paper and be like, what did I miss today? I missed doing this. Why? Boom. And then what am I going to do tomorrow to make sure I hit it? And then you write down that type of thing.
Exactly. And I think, taking lessons from all the other books the habit books that we summarized, about the components now, the implementation intention, those kinds of things, where you're going to do it, what time you're going to do it, making it specific. And so,
exactly. Using those tools with this.
You just use those tools. It's like, okay, fine. I've identified the problem. This is how I'm going to solve it. And this is the action plan to do that.
Like, let's just say the problem was I was in a rush yesterday. So the plan is tomorrow I'm going to wake up an extra, 5 minutes earlier to make sure I can do this.
I'm going to set my alarm for this.
Yeah, exactly that. And then you've kind of at least, and then obviously if that fails again, once again, you've now made another discovery, let's just say, as he would say, that you can then review the next day and be like, okay, right, so that happened. I wasn't expecting that. So how can I overcome this as well?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So he's got here as well, he made a note about the sort of Western culture and that, personal responsibility has been placed at the forefront rather than collective or situational. And therefore, this is why, in general, people sort of feel a sort of great deal of guilt and shame for not hitting, their daily targets or their goals, their aspirations, because, as a society, we place a lot of weight to the fact that we can choose what to do. And I think this obviously really impacts people who actually are like biologically addicted to things because they feel like failures. But the reality is actually sometimes they might not be able to choose or they might not have the power to be able to choose as much as other people do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it ties in a lot with what's it's different language, but essentially it's the whole motivation, aspect that the other books have touched on. We think we overestimate our ability to change our behavior and underestimate the ability of the environment. And so when we fail, it's like we think, oh God, it's almost characterologically diagnosing. I'm a failure. Me as a person, I'm a failure. I can't achieve this. I can't achieve that. But actually, that may be a cultural aspect to how we view ourselves and our behavior. So when we don't succeed, it's our problem and it's never something else.
It's funny because that exact sort of like idea reminds me of some of the books we were reading on communication as well. Remember when it talked about how to like criticize people and whatever? It kind of, you remove the criticism from the person and you make it more about the situation, because obviously nobody likes to feel that they're a failure as well. Because half the time, maybe you did fail your habit, but there was a situation which arose which you maybe couldn't have controlled. Well, you couldn't have controlled it that day. Let's just say, there were some sweets in the cupboard and you saw them. You probably could have technically controlled the fact that they were in the cupboard, right? But at least then if you review as well, you can then be like, okay, right, so what was it that made me fall for it? Fine, maybe I'm a person who likes to eat sweets. Okay, right, how can I put myself in a situation where that doesn't happen again? You remove it, and therefore then you exercise the control, right?
Exactly, and you learn so much more from your failures. I know that's like a typical.
It's so cliche, but it's so true.
It's so cliche, but it's so true. And you learn more about yourself as well. Maybe you are someone that when there is like something that you desire in front of you, you will act on it. So then you learn that you're maybe a bit more impulsive. So the way to deal with that is you change your environment. You design your environment so that you don't have those kinds of things tempting you all the time. So in that whole process, you've got that feedback. You've improved yourself.
Yeah,
it's that simple. And to not dwell on the failure in itself. But
yes. Should we move on to the next part? So this is one of my favorite sort of fallacies. So the information-action fallacy. It basically, the whole idea of it is information is not the answer to make people act in a better way. We all kind of know this to a degree. Like, we all know that 5 portions of fruit and veg, etc., would be better for our health, yet we don't act in that way. Yet governments and big corporations tend to think that, just giving people more information is going to make them act in a better way. And it's just an absolute, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to sort of see this play out in day-to-day life, you know.
Yeah.
Just because you give somebody the access to the information which they need to know to make better decisions doesn't mean they're going to, first of all, they're going to make the better decision, and second of all, are they going to even act on it?
Yeah.
Which is, it is interesting because, you know, if you look at a lot of like, not, I wouldn't say propaganda, but like a media, a public broadcast, I think there's like an underlying assumption, if you give people the facts, they're going to just behave in a way that's better. And we've seen time and time again.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work like that.
But think about what Wise Words does, essentially. Like, we're trying to make something actionable. We can give you the book summary, and information does help to motivate you, but it's what we were talking about last week with good habits, bad habits. It's like, you know, you can have that goal, you can have that aspiration, and that may help you to start a habit, but it doesn't help you to persist and maintain a habit, right? It's the same thing with information. It might be really interesting. You know, you watch a documentary, for example, and it's really inspiring, but that doesn't make you like maintain a habit. It just make you want to act. And that's essentially what we're doing with all the kind of actionable idea stuff is, yes, we're giving you the book summary, and we hope that you read that, and we hope you listen to the podcast so that you're inspired, but then you actually have the things that you can implement to act on.
Yeah.
Because what learning is doing, essentially, you know, and think about how many people will read books almost convincing themselves that they know it, but actually, you know, unless they've acted on the stuff.
Once again, there's a difference between knowing and actually acting on it. Like, I can know this is good for me, but that's not going to make me better. Like, that's not going to make me healthier. I can know that vegetable is good for me, but the only thing that's actually going to make me healthier is actually eating it.
Yeah.
And I think I've quoted this guy before to you, but Derek Sivers, it's the, you know, if more information was the answer, then we'd all be billionaires with six-pack abs.
Yeah,
because more information isn't the answer. It's the ability to act on information. That's, you know, the answer. Which is why, to be honest, me and you both enjoy the books that are the most practical, the best. The books which literally spell out to you, this is what you should do. Absolutely love it. Like, then we don't have to figure out what it is we have to do with this information. You know.
Yeah. And that's part of the process in itself that we've mentioned, that is friction to habit, right? We don't know what to do with it. We don't know how, and it's only by like creating a plan and maybe doing it once, you realize how simple something can be, and then your brain is much more likely to be able to deal with it, right? Because it's there's less friction now. You know, you've reduced all of that, and so being able to make something actionable is just so much easier. So much easier.
100%.
Okay, so then moving on. So the ethos of tiny habits. So the essence of tiny habits is this: take a behavior you want, make it tiny, find where it fits naturally into your life, and nurture its growth. This will show you how easy it is to get started and will help you learn the single most important skill in behavior change: feeling successful. I can remember, like, a big proponent of his that he talks about is how we feel, our relationship to this action, which actually
it was touched on with all the other ones, right? Like,
it was saying, like, reward is this. I thought was very, very like a lot of emphasis on feelings or emotions linked to that specific action. Obviously, like, you know, we touched on it with, you know, Atomic Habits and all that, like the whole idea of making it satisfying. But it was just, it's once again, it's just different language.
It's like what was the quote? I think there's something like, a habit that's rewarded is a habit that's repeated, or something like that. Anyway, but it's you've got to feel good doing it.
Absolutely.
Or feel successful having done it.
Absolutely. So keeping changes small and expectations low is how you design around fair weather friends like motivation and willpower. When something is tiny, it's easy to do, which means you don't need to rely on the unreliable nature of motivation.
So I mean, this, if you think about what Tiny Habits essentially does, is it ticks all the behavior law change, you know, boxes. Make it obvious. Well, I guess obvious. This is slightly different. Make it easy. By making it small, you're making it easy. Make it satisfying. You know, this is the point. You have to try and make it satisfying. But I think also, by the fact that you've done the thing, you should feel satisfied. If it's something you want to do and you know the value in doing that habit, I don't know about you, but if I know it's an important ingredient to my life, like as a habit that I've really struggled to do or wanted to do, and I do it, I always feel some level of like satisfaction just because I've done it. That makes sense. Whereas in the past I didn't.
No, absolutely. And I think integrating it into your daily routine, I think, is really important. And that's something that he emphasizes a lot in this book, as in, like, you know, once again, you want to reduce friction as much as possible. If you're already on your way to the gym, you can, or your gym is right next to your work, you're much more likely to do it than if it's, you know, 20-minute detour.
And to be honest, this whole concept of like the tiny habits we've talked about many times, and even to be honest, in the Atomic Habits, because we already knew about this idea. So we were talking about how to make things easy by just making them smaller. And then we even talked about it with the Elastic Habits, which was, you know, making the first tier of the habit really easy to do. And obviously the tier 3 would be, you know, something, it's meant to be like a personal best or something, right? If I remember correctly. But we've touched on this idea, and it just makes sense, right? If you think about it, by making something small and easy to do, it makes it more likely to happen.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So now we can move on to the next part, which is his famous model, the BMAT, I believe. I'll put BMAP here. Why the BMAT? I'm just trying to figure out.
No, it is BMAP, isn't it?
It is BMAP, I thought, yeah. So behavior equals motivation times ability times prompt. So behavior equals your motivation to do something, your ability times the ability to do it, times a prompt, which is obviously this, you know, you could say as a stimulus, or stimulus is probably the best word. And he basically says you can stop a behavior by altering any 3 of these components of the behavior model. So you can decrease motivation or ability, or you can remove the prompt. So this is pretty much, let's just run through an example, I guess, for like something to do with a classic like sugar, right? You can read books on understanding why sugar is really bad for you. So you increase your motivation to not want to consume sugar. You can, the ability, so you can remove sugar from your cupboards, which also technically links to the prompt, which is also removing it from anywhere which prompts you to have it. I mean, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If these areas are, I mean, if you've got all 3, you're fantastic, aren't you? If you sold yourself on, you know, not eating sugar, let's just say, because you're highly motivated now because you've seen you're on the cusp of getting diabetes or something like that, and you've done these other steps, it's highly likely that the behavior is not going to materialize.
Exactly. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but he said that the easiest one to kind of change is the actual ability to just make it as small as possible. Obviously, motivation requires more effort.
As he said before, motivation and willpower, fair weather friends, you know. That they ebb and flow, the motivation. You know, some days you feel motivated, some days you don't. So the ability is one of the, you know. And as we've spoken many times before, you could even say ability is, you know, knowing exactly what it is you're going to do. So like the ability to perform a habit is knowing what the habit is in the first place to perform. You know, if let's just say you want to get into the habit of doing an ab workout, let's just say was the example I was giving you. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't have the ability to do it. So how can you even do something you don't have the ability to do? It just makes sense.
And then, like, over time, as you're able to, you know, complete that action, then the motivation to do it increases as well, right? Because it's easier to do. You know that you can get it done. And so, you know, you're way beyond the curve, which he kind of puts in his kind of diagram. But if you're below that curve, you won't be able to achieve the habit, or it's like very strenuous and there's a lot of friction.
Can you add that the graph to the YouTube description? And it's if anybody's listening and interested, you can go on our full summary at the website of wisewords.blog, and you can see the graph, because it's definitely worth like seeing. Like visualizing, because it, like, for us it makes more sense because we've seen it. For somebody else,
I would put it up here, but I don't actually know how to do that on
potentially present. This could go completely wrong.
Where is present?
Share screen?
Okay, yeah. Present. Oh, you could do slides.
Would it take over the whole screen? That's the question. We'll find out very shortly.
Share screen.
It should just overtake yours, I think. Oh, there you go. This is cool.
You on it?
I can see it. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. So essentially, this is the BMAP model. And yes, if you're below the line, the action threshold line, then you're not going to be able to complete your habits. So by increasing motivation, you're more likely to be, and you know, making it slightly easier to do, then you're more likely to surpass the.
I know what the T is. It's trigger.
Like I would assume
BMAP or BMAT. Yeah. It's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same word. It's just synonym basically.
No, exactly. And then likewise, conversely, you know, if you make it really easy to do, even if motivation is low, then you can still just go beyond the action threshold. So 2 areas that you can manipulate to try and make that habit much easier. But yeah, definitely check out the podcast. I'm going to stop sharing now. Am I back?
You are back, yes.
Beautiful. Yeah, cool.
So cool. He's actually got, this is what I quite liked about his book as well, right? It was super practical. So he's now got the way you should go through the BBAP framework. So check to see if there's a prompt to do the behavior. Then you see if the person has the ability to do the behavior. Then you see if the person has the motivation to do the behavior. Yeah. So you start in that order. And then here he's got sort of make habits easier, brackets ability. The easier behavior is to do, the more likely the behavior will become a habit. BJ, the reason why he came up with this framework was because he realized that what many successful products and services had in common was that they help people do what they already wanted to do in a way that was easy. Yeah. Which we'll explore a lot in the hooked model, because that's pretty much how the sort of tech companies sort of coerce this. Yeah. So if you try a product and it makes you feel clumsy, stupid, or unsuccessful, you will likely abandon it. But when something makes you feel successful, you want more, you engage, and you make it part of your life.
Exactly. Once again, kind of tying in that whole idea of the feelings, the emotions that you have with that habit. Okay, so then on to like remove prompts. So whether natural or designed, a prompt says, do this behavior now. But this is the crucial nugget. No behavior happens without a prompt. You can disrupt a behavior you don't want by removing the prompt. This isn't always easy, but removing the prompt is your best first move to stop a behavior from happening. So like we said, if you don't want to eat biscuits, don't leave biscuits lying around.
Don't use your phone, leave it in another room.
Exactly. Exactly. Because it triggers that thought, right? You can see it in your visual, it's a visual stimuli, or even knowing that it's there, right? It will trigger that thought. If you put it away, then it's out of sight, out of mind. Other than getting off the grid, we may never find a perfect way to stop unwanted prompts from companies with business models that depend on us to click, read, watch, rate, share, or react, which is what we just said in terms of, the Hooked book pretty much talks about this in terms of social media companies trying to get our attention. They make money based on getting our attention. So, having notifications popping up left, right, and center. And realistically, all of society is practically on technology these days, so it's pretty difficult to get around that. But there are different ways. Let's say that you want to stop checking social media while you are at work. You can turn off your phone, put it on airplane mode, or turn off notifications to the social media app. Any of these will remove contextual prompts, and that might resolve the habit right there. So, yeah, a bunch of examples right there.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about sort of, there's many of these, it's just different words for the same things, The whole removing prompts is making this the inverse law, the first law of behavior change, to make it obvious, make it invisible. It's the same premise.
Exactly.
So next we've got the motivation. So here's the unfortunate thing. Most people believe motivation is the true engine of behavior change, which is true, because most people, obviously, being in this sort of Western culture, we believe that, personal responsibility and willpower like trumps all. So we believe, we can control our destiny. We can motivate ourselves to do things, when the reality is it's just not that simple. So
it's interesting. Yeah. Like, I'm just thinking that, even in so there's I can't remember what the term is called. I've learned about it in psychology, but the idea of blaming your environment, I think it's called like situational blame or something like that. Anyway, which a lot of us engage in, but even that, I think, is a reflection of us still thinking that we are responsible for our behavior. It's like deflecting it, right? So whether we voice it or not is different, but I think we still tend to like take it and feel the brunt that like, oh fuck, I failed,
because I think deep down, you can kind of change the situation to a degree. Like, there is some level of you causing something to do that situation, unless it's completely, in my head, if it's completely out of the blue, it's not your fault. So for example, somebody comes rearing off the road and hits you with a car, you're not going to blame yourself too much for that. But when there's stuff where you have some level of like control, then I think you do beat yourself up, even if you personally say it's the situation, you do go, actually, hang on a second, maybe I shouldn't have done this before, which caused that, etc.
And I tell you what's really interesting, it kind of does, like, going on a slight tangent here, but like remember in Shattered Assumptions when they were talking about women who had been raped, and how one of the mechanisms that they engage in is actually self-blame, because it fixes that kind of broken assumption that they don't have any control in the world.
Yes, yeah, no, I do.
And they somewhat self-blame until they get to a point where they have that confidence back, and then they can start to accept once again that, like, this is my fault, you know. But it just allows them to engage in that. I wonder if, on obviously a much smaller level, that we need to feel like we still have control, and so we sometimes blame ourselves and our lack of motivation.
No, it could be that.
For not pursuing a habit.
I think it's a very rosy picture of the world, isn't it, when you have that sort of idea of free will and you can control and manipulate reality. People feel more comfortable there than this is, you know, fate has given me this hand, or fate has done this and I had no control over the situation whatsoever. Yeah, I think what's also quite interesting here is this next point as well, with this, like, words like rewards and incentives get thrown around with such regularity that most people think you can create whatever habits you want if you find the right carrot to dangle. But what I find quite interesting with that point is because just, you know, the whole world, or the whole subject of economics is completely, like, at its core is based on incentives, you know. So the way most people view the world through the economical lens is actually built upon the idea that incentives get people to do things. When the reality is they do to a degree, but not always. Like, there's people who, you know, should be incentivized to work by theory because they're being paid, but they don't want to fucking work, you know. So that throws that out the window, right? It's not that easy. The motivation isn't just linked to being incentivized to work, you know, or to do something. And we put way too much.
Incentive is like a far off reward, right? Like, I think we talked about this last week, but a reward has to occur pretty soon after you complete an action, because of the way that our dopamine system works. But an incentive is like, oh, you know, I'm going to get my paycheck at the end of the month. It's incentivizing, but that's not the only reason why we perform certain actions or perform certain habits.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to that, I guess the incentive there is actually because it's more based upon survival. So the incentive is actually to survive, and it's the only job you have. So it's not actually based on, you know, earning the money. It's because, like, you don't really have a choice, right? And that's why you don't feel motivated, because you have no control over your life, so to speak.
Exactly.
But yeah, so on the topic of motivation, then you've got three types or three sources of motivation in the Tiny Habits framework. So you got yourself, which is what you already want. Then you've got the benefit or punishment you would receive by doing the action. So the carrot and the stick. So this is the incentive. So, you know, the benefit of working out, you feel good. The punishment you feel for, you know, drinking alcohol is you might feel hungover depending how much you drink. And then the other part of motivation is your context. So mainly the social context here. So what your friends are doing, etc., like that.
Yeah.
So whether you feel desire, excitement, or fear, it doesn't matter. Whatever is motivating the behavior will quickly be rationalized by your brain, which is a good point here, because we were just saying about coming up with excuses for, like, not doing things, or coming up with reasons why you're to blame and all the situations to blame when it's not you. But the reality is it's a mix of all of it.
Exactly.
But, like, I thought that's quite interesting, because if there's these different forms of motivation, right, you can technically leverage different forms, right? So I don't think he talks about it too much here, or maybe did further on. You know, obviously you can increase your personal motivation by selling yourself on why something's important to do, and also why something's bad to do again and again if you're looking at removing a bad habit, right? And then you've got this, you know, the secondary part, sort of the incentives. Like we did just trash them, but they do still kind of work to a degree. It just depends. Of course. It's just like you can't rely on them, right? So it's, I guess,
not the only reason why you succeed.
So another one would be, like, you know, the motivation in terms of the punishment. What you could do is say to yourself, if you ever have a chocolate bar, you have to have, like, a really hot chili afterwards. So you try to, like, train yourself to associate, you know, the bar of, like, absolute horror spice. Just a little idea for anybody thinking about it. So that's another example. Then obviously the context situation. So finding a friendship group or changing a friendship group, or, you know, telling them your goals, your habits, and hoping that sort of helps, or that changes to help you motivate.
Social contracts,
like Alcoholics Anonymous sort of runs off this whole, like, binding social contract between people with the same goal.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, and I think there's the last point here. It suddenly feels totally logical to do this thing that might be costly, time-consuming, physically demanding, or disruptive to our everyday lives. In regard to kind of like, what it was saying about how our behavior can quickly become like rationalized in our brain. And it's once again ties in with what we were talking about last week in terms of that kind of conscious mind, that executive control that needs to kind of justify its decisions.
It ties in with those what were the ones we talked about ages ago on the 8 rationalizations? What was it? It's not the 8 rationalizations.
It was the loopholes, you mean?
The mental loopholes.
The mental loopholes, yeah.
Because that's literally the exact examples of this.
Exactly.
Well, that is on one of the book summaries. I think we can try and find it and put it in the book. Maybe the notes on the YouTube channel or something, or something like that.
No, absolutely.
Because those are the most, for me, it's funny because we do make excuses for our behavior, but they tend to follow the same pattern, right? In my head. And the 8 mental loopholes are kind of like the overarching 8 different excuses we give in some form or another. They might be worded slightly differently, but they are like the fundamental 8 excuses we always make. And it's worth knowing them because, you can catch yourself. You saying to me, you've done this before, where you caught yourself, you're like, I'm using this excuse again. So
it's funny when you actually like suddenly become conscious of you using an excuse and you're just there like, this is such bullshit. And and then sometimes even then you might still follow through because you're lazy with that excuse, knowing that it's a shit excuse. Which is even worse. It's like, I know that I'm bullshitting myself and I'm happy with it. But yeah, it's quite funny. Okay, so motivation, willpower, and endurance. But here are some more subtle and predictable shifts. Willpower decreases from morning to evening. Complex decisions get harder by late in the day. Motivation for self-improvement can vanish on Friday nights.
That's a mental loophole there, isn't it? Like the sort of, it's the end of the week. I deserve I deserve to, treat myself, that type of thing.
But the other day, I was at an event and I try not to drink during the week. And it was a Thursday. And the guy was like, well, Thursday's just the beginning of the weekend. And I was like,
Thursday's the new Friday. That's the excuse. Right?
Exactly. That said, there's a special situation in which motivation can be enduring. Consider a grandmother who is always motivated to spend quality time with her grandkids, or the teenager who always wants to look good to her friends. These enduring motivations are called aspirations. And I think actually, I can't remember which other book it was in, but going off the previous point, the idea that willpower, this kind of muscle, fatigues throughout the day. And so if you are going to use it, try and use it on actions that really require it, rather than other actions that you could just kind of, you don't need motivation to motivate you. You don't need willpower.
It's funny, isn't it? It's funny how some people have different things that they need the motivation to get over, right? Yeah. So, for example, for me, I don't know about you, but reading, I find it's actually something I look forward to doing. So, I don't know, some people will probably struggle to pick up a book in the evening and read it, right? And they'd be like, how the hell do you read? And I look at them to go like, it's because it's like, for me, it's like almost like therapy. I love to do it. I couldn't do it more, if that makes sense. But I just find it funny how they would have to use willpower for something that I literally wouldn't even. Like, I become almost like a freak just because of the fact that it just doesn't even seem to need motivation to do, if that makes sense. But it's just funny how that changes over the time you build it as a habit or something, or as you sell yourself on it, let's just say. Same with gym, I guess, to a degree.
And it becomes part of your identity.
Yeah, it does become part of your identity. I mean, it may sound a bit airy-fairy, but all this identity stuff we've spoken about in the book, so I guess we actually can testament to it actually working, because I feel like since we've started doing these habit books, I've started taking my gym and fitness a lot more seriously, to the point now where I don't even think about, should I go to the gym this week? It's like, I'm going. I'm going. I like it. It's almost the case now of how many times am I going. It's a completely different ball game. It's crazy because it's not even like I had to kid myself. It's just the whole point that James Clear makes of repeating it and building up a score sheet, let's just say, of the times you went. You then believe you are somebody who goes to the gym and trains, and all of a sudden you look back and you're like, what was I doing before I even went to the gym? Because I can't even think about my life now before. It's crazy, isn't it?
The same thing goes with like, cold showers. Like most people don't have cold showers, and they can't even conceive the idea of why you would want to have cold showers, right?
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like I was talking to
that is a more niche one you've had, but it's equally important.
Because so many people don't like. Okay, now it's becoming a bit more mainstream that like cold therapy is good for you, but like some people don't even conceptualize that. And so the idea of having cold showers is so far from their normal behavior that like for them, it would require a lot, but it's once again, it's just so personal. And that's why it kind of ties in with the identity, because we're all different.
And we have different aspirations, right? This is part of what the next part's about, if my, like, let's just say there's a driving force in my life is I want to learn more. I want to, read more. Therefore, I will not find things that advance that goal taxing mentally, because I know that's what I want to do, and that's like what I'm motivated to do. Whereas, somebody who doesn't have that same aspiration, they're going to require motivating because they don't have that thing to aim at, to go for. And it it just makes sense if you think about it, really.
Absolutely.
Of course, somebody who doesn't have that goal, they would then have to convince themselves to have the motivation to do it.
Yeah.
Which now thinking about it, it all makes complete sense. So aspirations, time to be specific. Millions of people genuinely aspire to live healthier, less stressful, and more fulfilling lives. But here's the problem. People often believe that motivating themselves toward an aspiration will lead to lasting change. Problem is, aspirations are inherently abstract. And to be fair, he's made a really good point there, because immediately live healthier, be less stressed, live a more fulfilling life. All three are like, could you even define those?
Yeah.
First of all, technically you can, right? But this is the whole point. You need to define these things. So you can't achieve outcomes or aspirations solely through high levels of motivation, which is the least predictable and reliable of the three components of the behavior model. Aspirations are abstract desires, like wanting your kids to succeed in school, whereas outcomes are more measurable, like getting straight A's second semester.
Yeah.
And he's found that people don't naturally think in terms of specific behaviors, and this tendency trips up almost everybody. And that's quite a good point. It's like, I want to be healthier, but what you should be saying is I want to be eating healthy every day.
Yeah.
Because that's the specific behaviors that lead to the being healthy, right? And I think it actually reminds me a bit of which we're going to get onto in the future, the Road to Character book. He talks about how we all have vague moral aspirations. So we're all like, I want to be a good person. Because you haven't defined what good is, you open yourself up to like behaving badly, because you can then rationalize a bad behavior, because you'd be like, oh, well, I haven't even defined what good is. I just want to be good. This feels good to me because this is what I think a good person would do in this situation. And it might not be.
Well, I think they're all connected. It's just that they're different levels of analysis. Like it's fine to be like, I want to be healthier, but then that is like a broad, vague overall goal, aspiration. And then within that, you need to have a specific goal, right? So like to do that, I want to run a marathon, right? And then to do that, I've chosen my marathon. And to do that, I'm going to start, scheduling runs. And to do that, I'm going to tell myself how far I need to start running, or at what distance, or what. So there's different levels of specificity, and they're all connected. But it's like you do need that level of specificity. Otherwise, once again, it's vague. You can't act on it. It's inspiring, but it's only inspiring to act, and then you actually need to have those actions in place to perform. Otherwise, you're just going to be, once again, you're going to be lost. But there's no clarity. It's more friction, essentially.
You don't know for sure. Like we spoke about this before. Just things, if they're too abstract, it's not really a target. If it's too abstract, there's nothing to aim for, because it's too the target. Let's just say it's just too big. There's too much to go for. Like healthy, what does that even mean? Like I want to be fitter. Okay, what does that mean to you? Because everybody has all their own definitions of fit, right, as well.
Exactly.
Some people's aspirations might be like lose weight because they feel like they're overweight, whereas some people might be like, I want to get ripped. And that is within the same subset, I'll get healthier, fitter, but it's still completely different goals.
Many different goals.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is, it actually kind of reminds me as well a lot about the productivity books as well, in the sense that he talks a lot about having like a vague idea of a project, and the idea is you try and whistle it down to the actual steps.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me, like, people think in terms of like vague things, like I need to research this, rather than thinking, okay, what do I have to do to actually research this? Like put like, you can be mega specific, like put the search phrase in Google, you could be like that, or you could be like, check this website to see this research, check this research, create summary, Do you know what I mean? There's like way more steps to just research something than just the broad research, and a lot of this to do with following out your plans is just being really specific with what you need to do. To be honest, we're all guilty of like slipping into sort of abstractness because it takes effort to think through what it is you want and like how you're going to get there.
No, exactly. You just need to be more specific. Specificity is required.
So on his last point here, he's got we should be dreamy about our aspirations, but not about the behaviors that will get us there. Behaviors are grounded in concrete. They're the handhold and footholds that get you up the rock face. And like we just said, it just makes sense, doesn't it? You can't.
I've been looking for this quote that goes off the back of this, and it's like, a dream written down with a date becomes a goal broken down into steps becomes a plan backed by action makes your dreams come true. I just kind of like that, because it is about just breaking it down with different levels of specificity so you can actually act on it and then achieve it over time with accumulating those actions. That's essentially what habits are, right? Stepping stones to your goal, which is part of your bigger aspiration.
Yeah. What I quite like is this kind of links in a little bit as well with which one was the keystone habits? Was it Atomic Habits, or was it I want to say it was Habit Blueprint potentially.
Yeah, I think they touched on it in different ones.
And they might have touched it in the Power of Habit as well, I think, potentially. It's just more so like if you have like a really vague aspiration, like get fit, obviously you can then have very specific ones, but you should also pick out the habits or the stepping stones that are going to give you the most leverage towards it. And also there's a load of things that people sometimes as well, I think, forget contribute to the thing they're going after. So for example, let's just say you go something broad like be healthier. As we've now finding out, or as we will find out in our next podcast, we go to fitness. Fitness is not even just exercising. It's all of it. It's recovery. It's nutrition. It's sleep. It's all of these things. So a very broad goal of like, I'm going to get fit. I'm going to get in better shape. I'm going to lift weights and get strong or whatever, comes with actually a necessity to do about 10 different habits, possibly even more. And you should be picking the ones with the highest leverage, as well. Like, because a lot of people, I think as well, do these things where they set a really noble goal of, I want to be fitter and healthier, and they absolutely smash the gym. They do it really well, but they don't fix the other parts, like the recovery or their diet. And then they go back into their old bad habits because they haven't felt the improvement, because they haven't actually seen the stepping stones that that are needed to hit the goal they set.
No, of course. And like, obviously you don't want to adopt too many so that you're overwhelmed, but the more you have of the same habits going in the same direction towards the same goal, the more kind of positive reinforcements you have. So when you fall back on one, let's say you don't go to the gym, then you're going to feel even more guilty if you just, have a Deliveroo and have a greasy meal, right? So that kind of builds up.
It doesn't have to be 10 though, does it? Like you could try and simplify these down to just like, okay, make sure you go to the gym 4 times a week, make sure you have a portion of veg every day, and make sure you sleep 7 hours a night if possible. Those are 3 pretty good keystone, habits that obviously can be improved over time to be more specific, but as a first 3 are pretty good, And I think there's a lot of other areas in life where you could just pick the 3 that are going to make the biggest difference. And the big point of keystone habits actually was picking like sleep, for example, because it impacts every other habit. So like by getting enough sleep, you're going to have much more energy and motivation to stick to your other habits. And therefore these ones are the cornerstones of your life, similar to nutrition as well. If you're eating healthier, you've got more energy.
There was a good example. I think it might have been The Power of Habit. And it was talking about how getting people to there was a study that was like getting people to just write down what they ate, was a key, I was going to say a keystone habit, was really important, because basically they started writing it down and then they started realizing what they actually ate, right? So it made them conscious of what they were eating. And then, then they started to change that. And then they started to write down not just things to do with food, but other things that they were doing. And so essentially it made a cascade of them being able to view their patterns of behavior. And I think that's kind of like what a kind of keystone habit is also really crucial at doing is it reflects back to you what your behavior is in other areas, so that it starts to trickle over and you start to tweak those as well. Because as soon as you become aware of your own behavior, like we talked about over and over again, then you can start to be like, okay, well, in this area, wow, I'm eating a lot. Okay, maybe I should cut that down. Maybe I should start measuring how much I eat. Maybe I should, change what I'm eating. Maybe I should start, I'm, changing what I'm eating. So that's to do with health. Maybe I should start going to the gym more. All those things start to create that mindset that we were talking about at the very beginning of this.
Because it reminds me a bit of it was definitely James Clear with the Make It Obvious. It was like the touching and going, the pointing and saying,
yes,
I'm eating chocolate again. Imagine you might sound stupid saying it every time, but that's the whole point. You eventually realize, shit, this is the third time I said I'm eating chocolate again today. You know? And it brings, like you said, you can't change something until you become aware of it. What gets measured gets managed. Always measured gets managed. Something like that. I think that's the quote. But
so moving on. So the big habit question is, can I get myself to do this? The phrasing of the question is important. It brings together both motivation and ability at the same time. With this one question, you are addressing two components of my behavior model.
I thought it was quite an interesting point as well.
I think that is a good point.
Can I get myself to do this? You're right, because it's like, am I physically capable to do it, as well as can I see the value in it to do it in the first place? So the two crucial parts here of the motivation and the ability. But the next part is what we've been saying before. So the whole point here is the design for consistency. So when you're designing a new habit, you're really designing for consistency, and for that result, you'll find that simplicity is the key. First, you have to understand what makes something hard to do. That's why you should always start with this question: what is making this behavior hard to do? So once again, it's very similar to the Atomic Habits, just different wording.
Of course.
What's the friction point here? Why can't I do it? It's one of those things that we probably don't ask ourselves enough. Why can't I do this?
Well, you're trying to find those points of friction, that you can reduce in some way. And once again, it's like knowing what to look for provides clarity on, being able to be like, okay, this is a factor that's, interrupting this or interfering with this. And that's what I say, the next part is the ability factor. So the factors that can affect your ability to do something. So there are 5 here. And so the first one's time. So do you have enough time to do the behavior? Second one's money. So do you have enough money to do the behavior? The third one's physical. So are you physically capable of doing the behavior? Fourth is energy. Does the behavior require a lot of creative or mental energy? I think I quite like that one, actually. And the fifth one is routine. So does the behavior fit into your current routine, or does it require you to make adjustments? And so all these kind of tools, they're really important for especially when you're starting a habit out, you're starting to form a habit, because, we can jump into it, but sometimes, naturally there are going to be changes in life and it's going to throw you about and you're going to miss your habit and you're not going to know why. Unless you pay proper attention. And these just help you to guide you and go like, okay, well, what are the things that are interfering here? And if you have them at your disposal, I'm definitely going to plug these into mine. And then I can start, being like, okay, well, what is the factor here that's reducing this? Okay, how can I manipulate that so it makes it easier? So for instance, sorry. I was just going to say, using an example, let's say gym. Okay, so do you have enough time to go to the gym? Well, maybe you make time. Maybe you move things around. You don't always need to work out for an hour and a half. You change certain factors around time so that you can do it. So money, do you have enough money? Maybe you don't have enough money to go to a nice gym. Maybe you don't need to go to a nice gym. Maybe you don't need to go to a gym at all, and you just need to find exercises to do at home. Or you can start trying to take up a job and make money so that you can start to go. Physical, so are you physically capable? Maybe you're injured, maybe you can't go, but then that doesn't mean that you just are sedentary. You can normally work out something or do some kind of fitness even if you are partially injured, although obviously I'm not a doctor here, so consult your local doctor. Energy, do you have the creative energy or mental energy? I think this one's quite important because there are a lot of tasks that, for instance, I procrastinate when I have low energy, or I don't want to be starting to I don't want to have to be creative. And so maybe it's about, assigning it to a time when you know that you will have energy. Like after I have a cold shower in the mornings, I feel like fucking ready. I feel like I've just taken fucking steroids. So I can crack on with an idea. Maybe that's an option. There's multiple options to solve these. And then the last one is routine. So does the behavior fit into your current routine? Well, if my gym is next to my work, then yeah, it does. If it's half an hour detour, then it's a bit inconvenient. But maybe there's something else that is near my gym, and so it just makes it easier because I can kill two birds with one stone. So all these things, they're very easy to solve. It's just about like properly sitting down and being like, okay, well, let's smash these out and find solutions to them.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's perfect example. To be fair, very, very good. I'm wondering if there's more. By the way, I'm wondering if there's more of these abilities.
There probably are.
Because I'm thinking now. I was going to on my to-do list was to reread the book on when kale and coffee compete, because a lot of that book is about it's about consumer behavior mainly, and consumer purchasing. And I think I spoke about this in the last podcast, which is businesses tend to focus a lot on creating the motivation to buy products rather than the removing the friction of buying. So they try and convince you to buy it rather than removing the the reasons why you don't buy, for example. And I believe he had a similar matrix to what you got there in terms of what we got there with the ability factors. And there was more other ones, which would be interesting. Maybe I won't do it now, but I'll try and look it up and see if there's any cross pollination there, because there was reasons why people don't do things. I mean, I'm thinking, looking at this as well, harder to plan, but I guess context. But context could include all of that, right? Because technically context is that. Context is the money you have at that moment. Context is the time you have. So I think also another good point with this ability factors as well is maybe even planning for like failure, or planning for like one of these factors to be going wrong. So for example, with the fitness stuff, like you were saying, don't have enough money, don't have time. We were listening to the Andy Galpin and Andrew Huberman podcast, and he talks a lot about having like a backup workout you can do when you're on the go and you don't have time. So just doing like a hit, etc., stuff like that. But I'll look it up later and see what I can find, because it'd be interesting to add more points to that as just like I guess you call them friction factors, things that cause people to not be able to act in a specific way.
I think that'd be interesting actually.
So now we've got the usage or using anchor habits. So after I bracket anchor, I will bracket a new habit. So after I flush the toilet, I'll do 2 push-ups. This is basically in my head another form of habit. Well, it's habit stacking, isn't it? It's applying a habit to like a standard routine you have. So you've got to match the physical location. So first consider the physical location of your new habit. Find an anchor, you already do in that location. So if the new habit you want is wiping down the kitchen table, look for an existing routine in the kitchen. It's a pretty standard one. I guess another thing could be, you're making a coffee, you want to build a habit of meditating or something. You meditate in the kitchen or something like that, where you're already in that room. And
I think that's actually something I might implement that into like an area of my habits, because then I can basically categorize it based on maybe location, and then tick all the ones that I already do in the location. And then if I obviously ever implementing a new habit, then I can be like, okay, well, it's going to be in this location with these ones. How can I pair them? How can I stack them together? And make it obviously very specific. So like after I do this, I do this. And when I say specific in terms of that, it's like literal actions, right? It's not like after I go to the loo. It's like literally he says, after I flush the toilet, I go do 2 push-ups. He doesn't even wash his hands. I mean, like...
Slightly concerning.
He doesn't want to slip while he's doing his push-ups, mate.
That's it. So funny on that point as well is I've found myself with my cold showers brushing my teeth in the shower. I don't know if you do this.
I
brush my teeth in the cold shower.
I've never been someone who likes to do that for some reason. I've just never.
I never used to do it, but it's my way of distracting myself from the cold half the time. So I'm there, brushing, and if it gets really cold, I'm like. Exactly. So sorry. The next part of the anchor habits is match the frequency. So next, as you look at your existing routine, decide how often you want to do your new habit. If you want to do it once a day, then you sequence it after an anchor that happens once a day. That kind of makes sense as well. You know, you're not going to pair a habit with something you're doing 3 times a week, right? Like if you want to pair something to your gym going and you only go to the gym 3 times a week, it's not going to work out if it's a habit you want to do daily.
Yeah.
And then the very last point is match the theme and purpose. This element is less vital than the previous 2. So the best anchors will have the same theme or purpose as the new habit. So if you view coffee and its jolt of caffeine as a way to be more productive, then it might be good to anchor this habit for launching your to-do app. Very good point. Makes sense, doesn't it? You know, but like you said, with your cold shower, you come out, you're energized, and you know the next thing you can do is something to do with using your mental energy.
No, exactly.
Motivation.
So the next part is Pearl habits. So BJ calls these habits Pearl habits because they use prompts that start out as irritants, then turn into something beautiful. The whole idea of a pearl being, it starts very small and then turns into something beautiful. So step 1 is list at least 10 things that often happen to you that irritate you. A long line, a noisy motorcycle, a barking dog next door, etc. Step 2, select the most frequent and annoying thing on your list. And then step 3, explore new beneficial habits you could do after the annoyance, and then come up with at least 5 options. And I actually love this because I don't think I'd come across it, or I don't think I'd properly taken it in other books. But this idea that using irritants to prompt good behavior. So like someone
to motivate, I guess, in some way, is like it, because it is quite motivating. You have that energy, don't you? That, like, I don't even know how to explain it. When you're angry, it's like, I'm like, there is something behind you which can make you do something.
Yeah, and also you can change your relationship with that trigger, and that's what I find really interesting, because I would like to become more of a positive person. I think everyone does. I think I can be very cynical, and when I get like irritated on the tube when someone's playing their phone out loud when I'm reading, I get really irritated about that. But I can use that to react and
to punch him in the face.
Just but it shines a spotlight on me being angry, and then what I should do or what I want to do to solve that, right? And so then I can start, and this is what I remember thinking about this at the time, like perception training. So you change your perception of reality and how you interact with it based on triggers that you normally don't like. And I just thought that was a really interesting concept that I'd love to implement at some point, actually.
It's one of those ones that's a bit easier said than done. Is trying to notice when you're irritated, right? Because obviously the first instance is always like anger, and then obviously, like, I mean, that's I guess part of the anger management training to a degree is recognizing when you're angry, and then channeling it in a more productive fashion. Exactly. That's another tactic that we haven't really spoke too much about, so that's a good one. So then we've got this next note on the reward prediction error. So when an experience deviates from the pattern your brain expects, brackets, oh, my phone didn't break after all, that's when you get a reward prediction error, and neurons in your brain adjust the release of dopamine in order to encode an updated expectation. The definition of a reward in behavior science is an experience directly tied to a behavior that makes the behavior more likely to happen again. I mean, we've spoke about this, I think, in the previous podcasts. In regards to how your brain rewards and why you need, what's the necessity of having a reward for habits. So actually, this is actually a good point in the last bit, because we were talking about this with incentives earlier. So incentives like a sales bonus or monthly massage can motivate you, but they don't rewire your brain, because incentives are way too far in the future to give you that all-important shot of dopamine that encodes the new habit. So all these other habit books said the same thing, which is if you're going to reward the new habit, you need it to be as soon as possible after doing the habit. Part of the actual process behavior. No, absolutely. Oh, in fact, funny on this next, I just remember this next note because I did this for a while. I remember telling you about this every time I used to floss my teeth. It was like, yes. So he's a big advocate of like mini celebrations. So whenever you do the habit that you wanted to do, he would encourage you to tense, shout, do anything which is like celebrating having done it. So I remember I was telling you, I went for a stage where every time I flossed my teeth, I'd be like, yes, like afterwards, and it was quite a bizarre couple of, I mean, to be honest, the irony of all of this is I don't floss my teeth anymore. It
didn't work. Yeah. To be fair, off the back of this, I was very skeptical about it at first. And then there was a point in this where it was like, do it in a way that you would do it. So find a way that you would celebrate that is normal to you, rather than like, adopting some kind of celebration that everyone does, right? And so, yeah, I found myself kind of doing it where like my version was like, after I'd have a cold shower, I'd be like, yeah, fucking yeah, like that was mine. And it was just like
a psycho.
I was like, yeah, I can fucking do it. Yeah. But everyone's probably got their own. Like I could never go like, yes.
No, I can't. Yeah. Maybe that's what it was the cringe that stopped me.
But I do get the concept of like finding something that is personal for you to believe in when you're like, it's like, yeah, okay, I can fucking do that. I fucking did that. I'm that person. And yeah, so I thought it was an interesting concept.
Not really talked about, to be honest, as a replacement for the reward in the other books. But no. I mean, to be fair, it did seem to work for a while. And to be honest, the only reason I've actually, the more if I look back and think of why I've given up the flossing is actually because it's not in my view anymore. I've actually, they used to be like on the table, and I've realised half the reason I haven't even noticed that I've stopped until I'm talking about it now.
Yeah.
But to be honest, if I was actually going to reward myself now, I think about it, I'd probably just give myself a coffee. I try and postpone having my first coffee of the day now for like 2 hours before I wake up. So that's like my reward for like doing
that's your
morning
incentive.
Routine. Yeah, fine. That's my incentive. Sorry, for doing my morning routine. So like doing the cold showers, etc. I then, I have that moment where I've ticked off 5 things already. I'm like, sweet, now I can have my coffee. And I said to myself always that if I don't actually do it, I don't get the coffee. So if I don't have my cold shower, I'm not drinking coffee today. And to us, I don't need that motivation to do it, but it's always nice to have that as a bonus, if that makes sense.
It's an extra, motivating factor. But I wonder if the reason why he talks about being able to celebrate is it's because it's probably one of the only things that we can actually implement straight after we do an action that will, because we can't normally reward. It's not like you drink a coffee straight after you have your cold shower, right? Because like we've said, for a reward to bind, it's got to be straight after or part of the
cold shower. It doesn't really matter because the cold shower technically is rewarding.
It is, yeah, exactly. But my point being is in, this celebration, I kind of get it because, and you could also tie it with your overall goal, whatever it is that habit is part of. But let's say I finish a workout, I'm not going to get the reward straight away. I'm not going to suddenly feel euphoric straight away, but I could be like, okay, yeah, I'm one step closer to my goal, and celebrate.
That's how you should get to the point of feeling, right? Because you should be convinced that what you're doing is a stepping stone in the right direction. And therefore, by proxy, it should feel relatively rewarding for taking a step.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're kind of just showing like a conscious spotlight on it straight after you do the habit.
I'm starting to wonder as well, because obviously we've read all these habit books, and if anybody's listening and they've, started to implement habits themselves, I'm wondering if becoming aware of the importance of habits for the goal makes you realize each stepping stone is more valuable. So what I mean is most people probably don't think about how important every day is, but people like us who've obviously read all these books, and the people who are listening who've now listened to 9 podcasts on this and talked about consistency and doing it every day, they understand the importance of every single step, and therefore each step is infinitely more rewarding because they know it's the direction is right. They're taking a step in the right direction. Therefore, every single time they do it, they should feel some level of satisfaction because they're like, I've done it again.
Yes.
Because that's what you should be rewarding yourself for, is the fact you've done it again, and you shouldn't be rewarding yourself for hitting, personal best, because in reality, that's not what got you there. It's the everyday consistency. Exactly. I do think as we've got better with this, I don't know about you, but I've noticed that I celebrate every day I do it. Every day I do it, I'm like, I've done it again. I've done it again. Amazing. I've done it. Yeah. Because I also think back and think most people don't do this. And that's also another bit of probably more ego motivation than anything. But it's like, I've done things that most people wouldn't do. And that makes you feel better about yourself as well. Most people probably wouldn't do what I've just done today because they either don't know which direction they're going, they haven't scheduled in their habits or whatever. But it's quite motivating to be like, yes, like you said, I'm that guy. I've done my cold shower. I'm that guy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Exactly. And I think, and I kind of see the importance of doing that straight after you perform the action, because then, or the habit, because you're binding it with what you've just done, right? It's within that dopamine time frame where you're going to link what your celebration, your reward of finishing it, to the action you've just done. So you associate that habit more and more with, okay, I'm getting one step closer, like you just said, to my goal.
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
Yep.
So next part is de-motivators. So fear is the anticipation of bad outcomes. There are a few ways to weaken or remove the demotivator of fear. One common approach to dampen anxiety in social situations is by drinking alcohol. Are we promoting that here? Common scenarios: at a work party, your colleagues all invite you onto the dance floor. In this situation, you get on the dance floor and pretend to have fun because social pressure, a powerful motivator, which has overwhelmed your fear, the demotivator. One key to designing long-term change is to reduce or remove the demotivators. So are we, does that refer to basically just drinking alcohol to overcome social anxiety? Is that right?
But it's basically kind of that, yeah. It's funny, I was just listening to the Chris Williamson podcast as well about him having 1,000 days off alcohol, and he said one of his biggest changes was actual real confidence is what he called it, because he realized he had to be confident in these social situations where he was uncomfortable because he wasn't drinking, and he became more confident as a by proxy. But that's a side note. It makes sense. This is similar in my head. A demotivator is the same as a friction point, something that's causing you not to do something specific, and therefore it should be thought about, how to overcome, because it makes sense.
No, absolutely. I get that. So I quite like that, actually, that idea from Chris Williamson.
The becoming really actually
it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It does make sense. I was thinking
using a crutch, essentially.
Yeah, I was thinking the other day, when I was not drinking and I was at a place where everybody's dancing and I was dancing and I felt a bit uncomfortable dancing, right? And I was just thinking to myself, why am I feeling so uncomfortable? Is it because I feel like I'm being judged? But then if you really think about it, nobody there is judging you, because everybody else is just too busy, either drunk or just probably worrying about themselves, maybe.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to think that it is if you think as well about a lot of human interactions, it's let's get so drunk that we can eventually start dancing and having fun together. It's just what world do we live in where we all have to just drink to get up and have fun together? Yeah. Don't get me wrong, that's not even a judgment to these people, because I'm one of them at the moment. But it's crazy to think about it. If you just describe what's happening, a bunch of hairless apes get together, ingest some liquid, and then start dancing because they're not really capable of having the confidence to do it before. It's just
but also, even if you are getting judged, you shouldn't feel, that in itself builds confidence by overcoming the judgment of people, most people who you'll probably never see again.
Yeah, and right? Like you said, you shouldn't care about. It's why should you care what they think? But if you, like you said, you're going to meet them once. So the next on to the guidelines of redesigning your environment. When you design your new habits, invest time in redesigning your environment so they're easier to do. And as you continue doing a new habit, make the environmental adjustments as you go along. So similar to the mindset of, making mistakes and improving it as you go. Bit like my floss. The first thing I'm going to do after this is going to put it back out at the front again.
Yeah, good.
So Mark here, he's got his question tradition. Who says you have to keep your vitamins in the kitchen or floss in the bathroom? Okay, that's a good point. Why is my floss in the bathroom? Maybe your vitamins need to be next to your computer. That's an interesting point. I could put my floss by my desk. I'll probably find myself, when you get that urge to pick up your phone, let's just say you've got another room. Next thing you know, I'll be addicted to flossing.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And then the next part of the redesigning is invest in the gear you need. So suppose you want to bike 7 miles to school, even when it's raining and cold. Design out these demotivators by buying what you need to make biking in the rain cold and less painful. So by buying waterproofs, etc. I mean, that's a pretty smart one as well. It's preparing for the worst situation or preparing for situations where you're not going to feel like it. And then how are you going to overcome that?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I think that's good. And also it's by spending money on something, you're also holding yourself a bit accountable. You're more likely to
that's also about another point. Yeah.
Okay, so next part is next actions to create identity change. So finish the sentence. I'm the kind of person who I'm the kind of person who blah blah. with the identity oh my goodness, am I just being fucking stupid here? Or identities you'd like to embrace?
With the identity or identities you'd like to embrace?
Yeah.
No, I think it's the hyphens, mate. They put you off.
Yeah, they did a bit. So go to events that gather people, products, and services related to your emerging identity. Learn the lingo, know who the experts are, watch movies related to the areas of change you're interested in, update your social media page, put a new profile picture up that conveys your emerging identity. Teach others or be a role model to galvanize your new identity. A social role is powerful. And I think all of these are really interesting points. I think I really like the whole learn the lingo, because essentially you're finding more associations to do with that habit, you know, and with that kind of identity. And so, you know, the more time you spend in that, the more you're going to adapt. We're adaptable creatures at the end of the day. And so all of these kind of things help reinforce that identity that you're trying to acquire. You know,
the learn the lingo bit interests me as well, because obviously with our fitness recently, we've been learning the lingo for all the sort of like, you know, the different types of hypertrophy, the different. I mean, even the word hypertrophy, most people just call it like gains or like muscle gain. You know, do you know what I mean? It's the fact that I'm even saying that shows that I've done my bit of research, so to speak. But it's funny because I now identify with it more just by the process of knowing this language. If that makes sense. I feel more connected to that sort of space. Let's just call it the fitness and health space. Just through, you know, I guess reading, just through researching it, it's just been a bit. It's funny how you pick up the identity just through what you absorb through books, etc.
Absolutely,
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So the very last point we got here is supporting others in the change process. When supporting other people in the change process, let two maxims be your guide. 1, help people do what they already want to do, and 2, help people feel successful. It's a very good point, Yves. In terms of, I think number 2 is the more interesting to me, because obviously some people want to do unsavory things. Focusing on it, you know, help people feel successful is a big part. Like, you know, if you know somebody's going to the gym, you know, a comment like "you're looking good" or, you know, anything like that is going to help them, motivate them to continue on their journey. You know, it's these small comments of people realizing they've changed is actually going to motivate them more, because they're like, actually, not only am I realizing within myself that I've made these changes, but now external people are coming in and telling me, you know, great job at what you're doing, keep it up, you know.
It makes such a big difference. And I was actually listening to a podcast with Andrew Huberman and Jordan Peterson. They were talking about this and the importance of, you know, how, like, first of all, you know, we're so sensitive to other people's opinions. You know, our reputation is everything. And when we see, we can infer that, like, okay, we're doing an action and we're intending to do that action. We want to get better at doing that. But also our reality is also confirming that and reinforcing that. That's huge. You know, when people around you, especially if you care about them, reinforce that, then it reinforces their kind of their goal reward system. And their dopamine is like, fuck me, okay, I'm doing the right thing here. So it's so important. Like, even just slight little things, and I can't remember, is it in this book? Or maybe it's
I'm just chuckling because I'm thinking of that Instagram thing you sent yesterday with that guy who's like, "Nice ass, bro," and he's like, "Yeah, you're looking thick, dude."
Exactly. There we go. Prime example.
It's just
fucking hell. But yeah, no, it is really important. And also, you can it sounds manipulative, but in a way you can try and get people to do things by commenting on the good behaviors and kind of ignoring the bad behaviors. Right. So it's like, whenever they do something, I can't remember what book it was in, but it's like, you know, if you want them to load the dishwasher and they never really get around to doing it, and when they do, it's like, oh, that was really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Like, if you get, like, let's just say you did a job or like something around like your flat or for a friend, and they go like, "Oh, I'm really grateful for you doing that," or like, "You did a really good job," you're 10x more likely to, you know, to repeat it. And then if they criticize, be like, "Oh, by the way, you did this, or you forgot to do this," it's just like,
exactly.
It's just like, what?
It's funny.
Cool. So I think
there we go.
That was everything. Should we go back through like we usually do and pick, you know, let's pick the stuff which this book in particular has that the other habit books don't have as the sort of actionable steps. So let's go back to the beginning. If you want to start.
So yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is this BMAP model, which is it's used a lot and very popular. So yeah,
it's because of the simplicity, right? Like it's,
exactly, it's really simple to understand. And there are two, main like variables, and that's motivation and ability. And then obviously your prompts determine a lot of that. And that basically essentially, equates to the behavior that you want. So higher motivation and can help you overcome that like action threshold, and higher ease of ability can help you overcome that threshold. And you want prompts, that are appropriate for the behavior that you want to change
or relevant. Yeah. And so for me, one of the biggest takeaways here is this idea of separating aspirations and creating outcomes or steps. Having broad goals such as, I want to be fitter, I want to be healthier, I want to be richer, all these things which, are great aspirations to have, but lack concreteness. And I guess they give you a direction, but they don't give you like the stepping stones. It's like you could be you could be going there in a way quicker way by basically being more specific with the things you need to do to get to this result. So yeah, turning your aspirations, like get fitter, into something which is more measurable and specific. So like, detailing the behaviors first. So going to the gym 4 times a week, eating healthy, sleeping more, that type of thing is a much better way of approaching your aspirations. What are aspirations about smart, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound goals? It's hard to get there unless there is a target, or like at least a target you can see. Let's put it that way, because fitness, you can't really see that, but you can see 5 days a week working out, 7 hours sleep a night. You can see that, but you can't see the sort of vague aspiration of be fitter and healthier. And I think we all fall for these lofty, vague aspirations all the time, because this is the stuff everybody wants, but the difference between the people who get there and the people who don't, in my head at least, is this next level step of taking the time to decide what you need to do to actually achieve these things.
Absolutely, having that specificity and giving clarity, to that goal, being specific about what it is that you want. And like you said, like taking the time, I think that's really important. We're always in a rush. It's like, okay, I want to do this habit now. I want to try and implement it. But actually, if you just take a bit of time and just plan it and try and think about it, like, from a broad perspective, then I think you'll be able to smash that out. I'd say I also, look, 2 points. So I quite like this little question: can I get myself to do it? It really utilizes and makes you. There's like 2 variables of the BMAP, so ability and motivation. It's like, can I physically do it, and am I motivated to do it? So just asking yourself, can I get myself to do this, really kind of helps you approach performing a certain habit. And then I thought the ability factors, so the factors that can get in the way of performing an action. So what do we call them? I liked what you said, friction factors. So time, money, physical energy, and routine. And basically, the whole idea that, if we're not succeeding in a habit, or, there's a lot of friction to it, well, let's try and identify what type of friction that is, and can we change it? Can we find a solution for it? I think that was really good.
Just following on from what you just said there, so the question right above it in regards to designing for consistency, what is making this behavior hard to do, is a very practical and valid question to ask yourself if you're struggling to maintain a consistency to a habit. So, why am I struggling to floss my teeth every day? Okay, maybe it's because it's in a cupboard where the door's shut, so I didn't see it. And then at least if you thought that is the first problem, you solve that problem, and then you realize you're not doing it again, you've taken a step in the right direction to finally solving the problem of doing it every day, right? So it might even end up like we were just saying a minute ago, which I liked, is the idea of who said we should keep our flosses in the bathroom. Put it on your desk. And to be fair, it's a very valid point, because we sometimes constrain our problem solving by the associations with the word. So like when somebody says, where do you take your vitamins as well? Like, I have them in the kitchen. But you don't have to have them in the kitchen just because most people do. And we actually fail sometimes to actually realize that we've constrained its position in our houses just because everybody else has put it there. bit like the floss, bit like, I mean,
not
obviously
thinking outside the box.
Yeah, it makes more sense, obviously, to have your toothbrush and toothpaste by the sink. But you technically could have it by your bedside to remind yourself every night before you go to bed. Because you basically, what you could do is every day when you go to bed, you have to put it back by the sink, right? So every day you go, oh God, it's on my desk next to my bed. I better brush my teeth and then put it back in the other room. It's that type of changes where it's like creative problem solving that most people probably aren't even contemplating. To be honest, that was a point I completely forgotten about, because when we've spoken a lot about these habits, we have constrained most of our time to like doing this in this area because it makes logical sense. But sometimes it can make more logical sense to do it in an area which is not where you normally do it, but at least then it stands out.
Exactly. And it needs to be logical to you, right? Like if it makes it easier for you, then it's logically right. Right? Like it doesn't need to be, logically right for the average person. It may be easier for some people to have their toothbrush right by the sink because maybe they, whatever. But for some others, it might be better, when they're on their bedside table, like you just said. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. I quite like this other bit, the Pearl habits, the idea of taking something negative, like a negative trigger or negative stimuli, and using that to kind of shine a spotlight or have conscious awareness of your reaction, and then try to like implement a kind of habit afterwards. I thought that was quite cool. I really like that.
Yeah, no, I do like that. Was pretty unique to this book. Yeah, we never really came across that in any of the other habit books. Yeah. And then one of the last points we talked about a minute ago was the sort of creating this new identity, and specifically because we've talked a lot about the identity changes in the previous habit books, but this one about like learning the lingo, just from personal experience. I think diving into like a specific subject matter, let's just say if it was fitness or behavior change like we're doing at the moment, you learn the lingo and you start to identify more with that specific area. I mean, like if you study business studies, let's just say you learn the business terminology and you suddenly start seeing yourself as a businessman, because why wouldn't you? Because you've learned the terminology of business, if that makes sense. So by learning the words associated with a specific area or of human interest, you're going to end up identifying with that area. And that's going to help you keep to your habits.
Absolutely. And I think actually we did touch on this a while ago, but more in terms of like, if you're going to start a habit, why not try and understand the fundamentals first? Because then that will give you a better understanding of like which direction you should go. And like, okay, yes, you can adopt a habit and you can try and work it out for yourself and have a kind of feedback mechanism in place so that you can kind of learn from your mistakes. But also, there have been a lot of people that have got paved the same path. And, you can learn from their knowledge. Obviously you have, it's never going to be exactly what you're aiming for. And so you have to find the discrepancies in what's best for you and what, they're saying. But there are some fundamentals, there are some principles that underlie a lot of the habits that we're looking at. And if you can understand them, then it can be more motivating because it's like, okay, I know I'm going in the right direction here.
And also you can start looking for measures or progress or measures to show that you can look for, or you have more of an idea of where the gauges of progress are. So as you're doing these habits, you're like, oh, wow, I'm doing this now that I wouldn't have done ages ago. Therefore, this is a good gauge that I'm in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's everything that I had, at least. But
yeah, same here. I did really like it. I thought it was very actionable.
It's definitely one of the better,
simple.
Definitely one of the better ones in terms of somebody who's less interested in the science behind habits and more interested in the practical steps you can take to pick up good habits. This is up there with Atomic. Probably not as good in my opinion, but it's up there.
I agree. If you want to know all the kind of actionable ideas, you can head on over to the website, and they're going to be on the book summary. Next week, like we said, we'll be doing Hooked, and then the week after that, we'll be starting Exercise and Fitness. So no more habits.
But the whole point was there was like a logical extension, because we were trying to do, obviously, helping people pick up good habits and then moving straight into sort of fitness, followed by nutrition, rest, recovery. So basically, we're giving you the sort of groundwork for how you're going to start developing consistency and, sticking to habits. And then we're going to give you the habits that you should be adding potentially to your day-to-day. That's the plan, at least, as we do it ourselves, because that's what we're doing at the moment. So, we're the guinea pigs.
Yeah. Precisely. Okay. Well, cool. Yeah. Well, then that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Hey guys, well there you have it. We hope you enjoyed that book summary. Now we know it can be a lot to take in all at once, so if you want to be able to read this in a more palatable size, or you want to be able to implement any of those key actionable ideas that we were talking about in this episode, head on over to our website at wisewords.blog, where the book summary will be waiting for you. Also, don't forget to check out our socials, as we consistently upload the key ideas, benefits, and actionable ideas from all the books that we read. The links to those will be in the description below. Now, we want to be able to get you the best content in a way that's really easy to understand, but we need your help. Your opinion matters. So you are our feedback mechanism. And with those quick actions, whether that's leaving us a like or a dislike, commenting in the comment section below, or subscribing to our channel, all of those help us gauge what we're doing well and how to improve on our method of delivery. So if you have any thoughts on the matter, don't hesitate to act. It takes less than 10 seconds and it really helps us out. But with all that being said, until next time, stay wise.